Well then, as might be expected with all that is happening, this is starting to freeze on me, so I hope I get through. Anyway, so, this is just perfect as an example of what this guy, Albert Ellis, was teaching, and I have had the good fortune of learning this stuff, and I pass it along. So here's how it works. All right, as I give background to this, I'm not saying that the following story is exactly accurate. It's accurate enough for the purposes of illustrating how this came along or came about. So Albert Ellis, pretty famous therapist, was working with people who had anger issues and emotional instability, and so he was allegedly working on a unit, psych unit, and noticed that when this fight broke out over there, one of the guys that he was talking to got all agitated and he wanted to join in, and he got pissed off essentially, and the other guy was just chill. And the awareness seems pretty obvious when you say it, but it's profound when you start working it. And it is that what he realized is that it's not the thing that happens to us that upsets us, it's how we interpret the thing that happens. And so he comes up with this strategy called rational emotive behavioral therapy, or REBT for short, and he uses this acronym, or this ABCs, to help people to understand that the A stands for activating event, or if you prefer, antecedent. So that's the thing that happens, and we have almost no control over the things that upset us in the world. If you think about it, if you have control over those things, then what you want to do is change those things, therefore problem solved. So, but most of us, the things that upset us are other people's behavior, getting stuck in traffic, a myriad of different things that happen that are out of our control. Let's say 99% of all the things that upset us are not in our control. But what is in our control is the B, and that stands for belief. And what that is a choice to interpret what it is that is happening in a different way so that what is happening no longer upsets us. Now, this may strike anybody's ear as foo-foo, or I don't know how it strikes your ear, but if you work it, it works, okay? And it is true that if, somebody, beats up your child or does some horrific thing, it's almost impossible to take that and make it okay in our mind. But, let's not get to the huge stuff yet. Let's just start dabbling with the things that can make more sense. Now, the C in this model stands for consequence. And the consequence in this model isn't consequence like, I get in an argument, or I get in a fight, or I lose my job, or I go to jail or the hospital. No, it means, am I upset or am I not upset? Because in this model, this is not about acting upset. This is not about, any kind of other causes or any other things that happen, meaning that, okay, we can act upset and not be upset. We can be upset and not act upset. But if you look at the scan of your brain at the moment of that thing happening, either that area of the brain, in particular the amygdala and the hippocampus, other areas of the brain that cause us to, that are indicators of us being angry, are activated or they're not. And so now let's just take a look at this. Let's say that somebody flips you off, okay? And the belief behind that for most people is going to be some version of they just disrespected me, they challenged me, they're essentially it's an FU, and we all respond, or most people respond to FUs very, very poorly. And now, having been a guy who, I grew up, as I said before, started to really feel the anger inside of me at 10 years old, and then, went through some hardships, joining the carnival, joining the army, being a biker, all these things. So the foundation that I lay here is to say that for me, back in the day, before I learned all of this stuff, it would be essentially not even a question of how I responded to somebody flipping me off. It was probably going to end up not necessarily in violence, but certainly could. It's going to end up with words being thrown about. What I learned, thank God, is that what that is a finger, okay? And the idea now that somebody's finger could control my mood is now a thing of, absurdity, right? Because now when somebody flips me off, I just see a finger. Now, I understand that for a whole lot of people hearing this, they might think that that's a sign of weakness or cowardice or whatever else it may be, that they need to stand up, or I should stand up for myself. Listen, I've stood up for myself plenty of times around that. That didn't take strength, I assure you. That just took automatic pilot for me. I learned how to fight. I learned how to go off on people. What took a lot of strength and effort for me to do is to work my thinking to go, oh, you can point any finger you want at me or up in the air, and it should not bother me. Now, think about this. If somebody goes like this to you, now we're like, well, wait, what's that? I'm number one. Then it gets weirder if somebody goes like that. Nobody ever does that, but it would be super duper weird. Somebody puts that digit up in the air, and now we're good, right? Same thing with this. If somebody goes like that, then oftentimes we interpret that as, okay, everything's good. Except if we're in the Middle East, somebody's calling you an asshole. So here, our response is, hey, good. There, our response may be, wanting to argue or fight or whatever it is. And it's not that upsets us. It's our interpretation of that upsets us. Now listen, for anybody who has anger issues, this can very easily sound like I am encouraging you to be a pushover or a punk or a pussy or I don't know what, but it's not that. When we get a strong sense of self, then whatever anybody else does, essentially, short of, I don't know, well, I don't even want to draw lines here. I'm saying it can go as far as you need it to go. That, when we have a sense of self, our own sense of that self means that anybody can call me anything they want. I don't care. It doesn't matter. None of that defines me, you understand. None of it defines you. So if I call you the dumbest person I've ever met, that doesn't define you as the dumbest person I've ever met. It means I'm trying to push a button or something. Nor are you, right? And everything that we are is just based on a continuum anyway. And what I mean by that is that right now, my best understanding of the population is there's 7.5 billion people on the planet, okay? So that means that no matter what you're comparing yourself to, whether it's the smartest person or the dumbest person or the best looking or the ugliest or money or whatever else, means that there's the richest person in the world. Where's my fingers? How am I doing this? Okay, there we go. So there's the richest person in the world, and then there's the poorest person in the world. And then there's the guy that can't figure out the center of the screen. Piss me off. No. So we only occupy one dot of 7.5 billion people, right? So if you look up the line, then you're smarter than people. Wait, you're dumber than people. And if you look down the line, then you're smarter than people. And so the deal is to not compare ourselves with anybody else. The deal is to identify what we want to be, how we want to be, and do work on improving that, right? Now, you know, if we get caught up in appearances, we're doomed because, okay, you can do everything that you want all day, every day, but we're still all going to age. The more I'm looking at my posts, the more I'm realizing that. What's up with that chicken neck? Anyway, so the thing is that, you know, comparing to anybody is a loser's game. And, you know, so I'm calling you a loser. No. What I'm saying is that reinterpreting events are what will change things for us. So an example that I like to use in my office is that if a person, and this is real common, that people get upset because of being stuck in traffic, right? And so then I point out that we're sitting in my office and probably not being pissed off by being still. And so it's really about the fact that we have these expectations about how things should go, and if we just reframe the experience and say to ourselves, okay, this thing that is bothering me, let's say it's, well, this is a big one in people's lives, disrespect. And, you know, the people who disrespect or demand respect of other people are typically very disrespectful of other people and of themselves. And to illustrate that, I'd give you a second to think about where can you find people who require from others the most respect? This may be a strange question to ponder, but what I'm suggesting is you find them housed together in big clumps in prison, because usually you've got, you know, gangbangers, you got mafiosos, you got bikers, you got all these other characters that think that if you don't respect me, you know, then that's a big problem. And frankly, what they demand is not respect. What they demand is cooperation out of fear. They demand, you know, subjugation from other people, and that's not respect at all, right? So, in regards to this, for me, and I think for all of us, the deal is to act respectfully, to be respectful, and just whatever anybody else does doesn't define me. It doesn't define you, right? That we simply accept. Now, this doesn't mean that we let people push us around either. This doesn't mean that we just walk around going, yes, dear, or whatever. No, what we do is we establish what is okay for us, and then when people violate that criteria that we have for what's okay and what's not okay, that we call them on it, that we say, hey, well, what do you mean by that? Hey, I don't feel that's okay. Let's talk about what we can do to either make it so that we can have a interaction that is healthy between us, or if that doesn't work, sorry, go away, right? That's the solution, right? If you cannot find people who will treat you well, I mean, because this is the big thing here, is that we want to remember that our priority in life is to treat ourselves well, and then disallow for other people to treat us poorly. Now, how you go about that is, you know, tricky business. It takes some work. It takes some finesse. It takes some tact. You know, it takes some dialogue. Now, what we want to remember is that all of these things require time and effort. We want to create a new neural pathway. You see, one of the things that we want to remember, here's a metaphor that I like to use. If we are driving around in a field and let's say it's a flat field and there's no boundaries, there's no barriers, and it's 5 miles by 5 miles and we're in a 4x4, we can go anywhere in that field. And when we go in the same direction repeatedly, we create a path. And then the more we go over that pathway, the more that becomes a rut. So we can be driving our truck around that field randomly, and every once in a while we're going to fall into that rut and it's going to take us where it wants to go. So that if you take that metaphor and you start to fold it in on yourself, till it's about this size right here, you have a very good metaphor for the brain when it comes out of the womb. There are some automatic, you know, unconscious responses in the brain that are created in the uterus for digestion and crying and breathing and all these things that humans just naturally do. But the vast majority of the best count is 80 billion neurons. So we've got 80 billion neurons, and they have, each one of these neurons have tentacles that send out neurochemical messengers across these little gaps. So you got the sending neuron and the receiving neuron and a little gap there. And these are all created during the course of our lifetime through repetition and reinforcement. So that when we are exposed to new information, what happens is that the neurons will send out tentacles to the adjacent neuron, and if the information isn't seen to be valuable, then they'll retract, they'll go someplace else. But if it is seen to be valuable, then what happens is, through repetition and reinforcement, this stuff called myelin starts to circle the connection, and if it gets to the end, it's called a myelinated sheath. And short of brain damage, that's not going anywhere. Excuse me. Now, the thing about that is that while it's not going anywhere, that doesn't mean that we have access to that information all the time. People who study this stuff point out that the subconscious, which by virtue of the term means below your awareness, is like the iceberg. God, I wish I'd get this right. The iceberg, and our conscious is the tip. What we know of the world is, you know, minuscule compared to what's in our brain. Okay. Now, here's the important part of all of this: is that we can create new neural pathways. It's called neuroplasticity. We just take a new thought. New thought being, if anybody flips me off with a middle finger, every time I see that, I will catch myself being upset, and I will remember that this is nothing but a finger. Okay, and over time, it will become just automatic response to me. Okay, and it has. And there are so many other things. Being stuck in traffic. I used to go out of my mind being stuck in traffic. Nobody knows how to drive, right? Well, yeah, I'm probably the biggest, hazard out there. But in any case, the fact of the matter is that if I get stuck in traffic now, I just remember that life is good. I'll get where I need to go. I've got a car to be stuck in traffic with in the first place, which automatically puts me in a category of a huge blessing, and then put me in that same car in the United States, and let's say I'm going to a job or whatever it happens to be, And, you know, now I'm one of the most fortunate people in the world. Most of the rest of the world would say, well, where do I sign up for your problems right there, right? Instead of, you know, being pissed off and worrying about where, you know, the traffic problem is or what I got to do or whatever that happens to be. And, you know, ultimately, I always get where I need to go. You always get where you need to go, right? And, you know, even if you're going to be late for something, well, what's the point of being upset? We've got these wonderful devices that we carry around that's, you know, they say has more computing power than, you know, the computers that took men to the moon. And I can just call up where I need to say, hey, I'm going to be late. All right. So this is a element of the ABCs of REBT. I will try to remember where I left off and continue on, but my throat's getting a little irritated. So I'm going to hang it up for now and talk to you soon. Bye.